In the quiet halls of aristocratic England, a single sealed document detonated like a royal thunderclap. The Duchess of Gloucester's final will, centuries in the making, did the unthinkable. A priceless estate, steeped in royal blood and wartime secrets, was left entirely to Catherine, and Camilla, strikingly absent. Was it oversight or a deliberate, devastating message from beyond the grave? Tonight, we uncover the inheritance that has fractured the crown. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The reading itself was meant to be procedural, almost clinical, but nothing about that afternoon felt ordinary. Within a private chamber reserved for matters too sensitive for public corridors, the Duchess's final words were lifted from parchment and delivered into a silence so complete it felt engineered. Each clause carried weight, each name triggered a subtle shift in posture among those present. The estate, that sprawling, century-old symbol of aristocratic endurance, was introduced not as property, but as legacy. It had survived war, scandal, abdication, and whispers of betrayal. It was more than land. It was lineage crystallized in stone. And then, with chilling clarity, it was declared Catherine's. There was no dramatic gasp, no public outcry in that moment. Instead, there was something more dangerous: stillness. Camilla's name did not follow. It did not appear as co-heir, beneficiary, trustee, or symbolic mention. It simply did not exist in the document. For those who understood the monarchy's delicate internal choreography, the omission roared louder than any accusation. Inheritance within royal circles is never accidental. It is coded. It signals trust, allegiance, and the direction of influence. To be excluded from such a monumental transfer was not a minor slight. It was a message, precise and irreversible. Catherine, poised as ever, reportedly received the declaration with composed restraint, yet those who observed her closely noticed the tremor beneath her calm. This was not triumph. It was burden. To inherit the Duchess's estate was to inherit expectation to become custodian of a legacy guarded fiercely for generations. There was admiration in the room, yes, but also scrutiny. What did this mean for her future role, for the evolving structure of the monarchy? In that instant, Catherine was no longer simply a respected figure within the royal fold. She had been marked as chosen. Beyond the chamber doors, palace aides moved with urgent precision. Statements had to be drafted, narratives shaped. The press would not treat this as routine aristocratic housekeeping. They would sense the fracture immediately. Calls were placed to senior advisors, and contingency plans whispered into action. Because beneath the legal formalities lay a more volatile question. Why? Was the Duchess rewarding devotion? Was she signalling a vision of the crown's future, anchored in Catherine's steadiness? Or was this, as some dared to speculate, a quiet reckoning, a final assertion of belief about who truly embodied the monarchy's enduring spirit? For decades, the royal family has projected unity as both shield and spectacle. Yet in a single afternoon, that carefully polished image felt fragile, not shattered, but strained. The transfer of one estate had exposed the invisible lines of loyalty that run beneath royal tradition. And as the news began to ripple outward, transforming whispers into headlines, it became clear that this was not merely about property, it was about power, perception, and the unspoken hierarchy within the House of Windsor. But to understand why this estate matters so deeply, and why its transfer feels like an earthquake, we must step back into the shadows of its past. This was never just land. The Gloucester estate has survived wars, abdications, forbidden romances, and whispered betrayals. Its stone walls have listened to secrets that could crumble dynasties, and now, after more than a century in one bloodline, it has been handed to Catherine. Why would the Duchess break tradition so dramatically? And what does the estate truly represent within the monarchy's unspoken hierarchy? To understand the shock of this transfer, you have to return to the estate's origin story. Born in a season of royal instability, when the crown trembled under scandal and uncertainty, it was granted not as a casual gift, but as a calculated reward during a time of crisis, bestowed upon an ancestor of the Duchess for unwavering loyalty, when others faltered. At a moment when allegiances shifted like sand, the estate became a symbol of steadfast devotion, a promise etched into inheritance that loyalty would be remembered, protected, and honored across generations. Over the decades, that promise hardened into tradition. Each heir who stepped into custodianship of the Gloucester estate understood that they were not simply inheriting acres of land or ancestral halls. They were inheriting a silent contract with the monarchy itself. During wartime threats, it was guarded fiercely. During internal royal disputes, it remained neutral ground, a sanctuary where fragile alliances were preserved. Stories linger of previous heirs refusing lucrative offers, turning down political leverage, even enduring personal sacrifice, rather than see the estate diluted or misused. To hold it was to stand as a pillar of continuity when the institution swayed. For the Duchess, the estate was more than a family possession. It was a living testament to what she believed the monarchy should be. Throughout her life, she protected it with quiet intensity. She modernized its operations, but refused to alter its core identity. She preserved its archives, honored its history, and treated it as a sacred trust. In private conversations, she often referred to it as the anchor, a grounding force amid the turbulence of public life. To her, the estate embodied true royal continuity, untouched by shifting headlines or evolving public opinion. Traditionally, inheritance followed a predictable path within her branch of the family, guided by proximity, protocol, and expectation. The estate was meant to reinforce established lines, not disrupt them. Yet with a single stroke of her pen, the Duchess broke from that pattern. By bypassing convention, she transformed the estate from a symbol of routine succession into a declaration of belief. It was no longer simply about bloodline proximity, it was about perceived guardianship of values. And that is where the tremor begins to deepen. Because within royal circles, allegiance is rarely declared openly. It is implied through gestures, invitations, patronages, and, most powerfully, inheritance. By choosing Catherine, the Duchess subtly redefined where she believed the future strength of the monarchy resided. The estate, once a reward for loyalty during crisis, now becomes a statement about who she trusted to carry forward that same resilience. It suggests a recalibration of royal allegiance, one that does not follow expectation, but conviction. And as that realization settles over palace corridors and public consciousness alike, one truth becomes undeniable. This decision was intentional, symbolic, and profoundly personal, and at the center of this inheritance storm stands one woman poised, composed, but suddenly thrust into an emotional spotlight. Catherine never asked for this, or did she? Long admired for her composure, she has carefully navigated royal life with unwavering dedication. But the Duchess's decision suggests something deeper, a bond forged in private conversations, quiet admiration, and shared values. Was Catherine seen as the future of the monarchy in ways others were not? And what silent endorsement does this inheritance represent? For years, their connection unfolded away from headlines. It was not loud, not theatrical, not designed for spectacle. It was built in measured exchanges and mutual understanding. The Duchess, seasoned by decades inside the institution's inner machinery, recognized something in Catherine that others perhaps underestimated: not glamour, not popularity, but endurance, a steadiness that does not fracture under scrutiny. In private gatherings, their conversations often lingered on duty rather than privilege, on responsibility rather than recognition. That quiet alignment formed the backbone of a relationship that now feels charged with new meaning. They shared more than polite affection. They shared an almost old-fashioned belief in service. Both women understood that survival within the monarchy is not secured through applause, but through consistency. The Duchess had witnessed cycles of turbulence, scandals that rattled public trust, generational shifts that tested loyalty, moments when the crown appeared vulnerable. And during those periods, Catherine emerged as a stabilizing force, not by commanding attention, but by absorbing pressure. Not by speaking loudly, but by standing firm. It is said the Duchess admired that restraint, seeing in it the kind of leadership that sustains rather than dominates. There were whispers that the Duchess had grown increasingly reflective in her later years, quietly confiding concerns about where the monarchy was heading. She feared that spectacle might eclipse substance, that modern pressures could erode tradition's backbone. In those moments of candor, Cather reportedly listened more than she spoke. That listening mattered. It signaled patience, humility, and a willingness to carry forward principles that cannot be codified in law, that must be embodied. When the Duchess revised her will, those private conversations may have echoed louder than public ceremonies ever could. The estate, then, becomes more than inheritance. It transforms into a vote of confidence, a deliberate transfer of guardianship. To entrust Catherine with a legacy so deeply entwined with loyalty is to signal belief in her as a custodian of continuity. It is emotional and strategic all at once, because within the monarchy, symbols carry weight beyond their material value. By choosing Catherine, the Duchess did not merely elevate her status. She reinforced her narrative as the enduring thread in an evolving tapestry. Public perception now magnifies that symbolism. Catherine has long been framed as continuity personified, composed, disciplined, aligned with tradition, yet adaptable enough to meet a changing world. This inheritance cements that image in a way no official title could. It whispers that she is not simply a participant in the monarchy's future, but a pillar of it. And yet, with elevation comes burden. The estate is not a prize, it is an expectation. Every decision she makes from this point forward will be weighed against the Duchess's faith in her. The applause from some quarters will be loud, the scrutiny from others sharper, because when one figure is quietly endorsed, the contrast becomes unavoidable. And in that contrast lies the tension that now pulses through royal corridors. But as one woman is elevated, another is conspicuously left in the shadows. There are omissions, and then there are statements. Camilla's exclusion from the inheritance list was not a clerical error. It was precise, intentional, and devastatingly public once reveal. Ed. For a woman who fought decades to secure her place within the monarchy, this absence speaks volumes. Was this the Duchess's final verdict, or an echo of long-standing tensions buried beneath royal smiles? Camilla's journey within the royal institution has never been simple. It has been carved through controversy, endurance, and relentless scrutiny. She did not inherit automatic affection from the public. She earned her position through persistence, navigating criticism that would have shattered many others. Over time, her role evolved. She moved from outsider to accepted figure, from whispered scandal to established presence. That transformation required resilience. It required patience. And above all, it required the monarchy to signal that she belonged. Which is why this exclusion feels less like a minor oversight and more like a deliberate withdrawal of symbolic endorsement. Rumors of ideological differences between Camilla and the Duchess had circulated quietly for years, nothing explosive. Nothing ever confirmed, but subtle contrasts in priorities were noted by those who watched closely. The Duchess, deeply traditional, guarded her interpretation of royal duty with near-sacred intensity. Camilla, pragmatic and adaptive, represented a different strain of survival, one forged in reinvention rather than preservation. Their interactions were always courteous, yet some sensed an undercurrent, not hostility, but distance. A divergence in how each woman believed the monarchy should evolve. That divergence now takes on sharper meaning. The Gloucester estate was never just property. It was a declaration of alignment. By excluding Camilla, the Duchess may have signaled disagreement not with her title, but with her vision. And within the monarchy, vision matters as much as hierarchy. Historical friction between branches of the royal family has often been disguised bene, ath ceremony. Smiles conceal strategy. Applause masks rivalry. The estate transfer has peeled back that veneer, revealing that old tensions may never have fully dissolved. The emotional sting cannot be understated. Public exclusion from a will of this magnitude sends a message to the world. It invites speculation about trust, about legitimacy, about whether acceptance was ever truly complete. For Camilla, who has spent decades solidifying her standing, this moment risks reopening narratives she worked tirelessly to quiet. It is one thing to face criticism from commentators. It is another to face silence from within. The media seized on that silence instantly. Headlines framed it as a royal snub. Commentators dissected language, searching for hidden clauses, overlooked mentions, anything that might soften the blow. Yet the palace response was restrained, almost surgical. No public rebuttals, no emotional statements, just measured acknowledgement. That restraint, however, only amplified the tension. Because in royal politics, silence can be louder than outrage. It suggests calculation, it suggests awareness that words might inflame what discretion can contain. Questions now ripple outward. Was Camilla deemed unworthy of this particular legacy? Or was the Duchess drawing a line between personal affection and institutional endorsement? Inheritance, especially one so symbolic, shapes perception, and perception shapes power. To appear sidelined at this level introduces subtle political implications. It shifts the balance of influence. It reinforces Catherine's ascent while casting Camilla into a complicated light, respected, yes, but perhaps not fully embraced within certain circles of conviction. For the public, the contrast is dramatic. One woman elevated as embodiment of continuity. Another, conspicuously absent from a legacy meant to define loyalty. The contrast fuels narratives of division, whether intended or not. And inside the monarchy, where optics are curated with precision, such contrast cannot be ignored. Behind the palace walls, reactions were swift and far more revealing than the public ever saw. When the doors closed and cameras vanished, the atmosphere reportedly shifted from ceremony to crisis. Advisors convened, calls were made, allegiances quietly assessed. This wasn't just about property, it was about power. What conversations unfolded in candlelit drawing rooms that night? And did this inheritance expose fractures the monarchy had worked tirelessly to conceal? Inside the palace, composure gave way to calculation. Senior advisors, seasoned in damage control, were summoned with urgency that betrayed the gravity of the moment. The duchess's will had done more than redistribute wealth, it had redistributed perception. And perception, within the monarchy, is currency. There were immediate concerns about optics. How would this play across front pages? How would it resonate among loyalists who prize unity above all else? The silence surrounding Camilla's exclusion threatened to become a narrative of division unless carefully managed. Private family gatherings that followed were said to carry a weight rarely acknowledged in public. Conversations were measured, but tension threaded through them. Catherine, newly entrusted with the estate, was mindful of the symbolic ripple effect. Camilla, dignified yet unmistakably affected, had to confront the reality that omission speaks louder than inclusion. No one raised their voice. No one needed to. The air itself carried the unspoken question, what does this mean for us now? Communications teams moved swiftly to shape a public-facing message rooted in respect and continuity. The emphasis would be on honoring the Duchess's wishes, celebrating her legacy, and avoiding commentary on what was absent. But behind that polished exterior lay deeper anxiety. There was fear that speculation could spiral, that commentators might frame the decision as proof of internal rifts. The monarchy has weathered storms before, but it survives by projecting cohesion. This inheritance risked puncturing that projection. As statements were drafted and redrafted, subtle alliances began to surface. Those who saw Catherine's elevation as reinforcement of stability rallied quietly behind her. Others, sympathetic to Camilla's position, urged caution and restraint. These were not open factions, but currents beneath the surface. Every word spoken internally carried consequence. Every gesture risked interpretation. The Crown found itself performing a delicate balancing act, honoring the Duchess's autonomy while preventing her final act from destabilizing the present. What made the situation more volatile was timing. The monarchy stands at a generational crossroads, navigating modernization while clinging to tradition. In that context, the estate's transfer felt like more than a personal preference. It felt like a directional signal. Advisors understood that symbols shape legacy, and legacy shapes authority. If Catherine's role was subtly strengthened, what recalibration might follow? And if Camilla's position appeared even slightly diminished, how might that shift internal dynamics? Throughout the night, discussions circled the same fragile truth. Unity must be preserved at all costs. Yet unity built on silence can sometimes mask unresolved tension. The Duchess's will had peeled back layers carefully arranged over years of strategic presentation. It forced the monarchy to confront the reality that symbolism cannot be entirely controlled once released into the public sphere. Even as dawn approached and official calm was restored, the undercurrent remained. The crisis was not explosive. It was controlled, contained, but undeniably present. Because beneath the emotional responses and public statements lay something far more calculated, far more enduring than momentary discomfort. Yet the deeper shock wasn't simply emotional, it was strategic. Was this a grandmotherly gesture or a masterstroke of royal strategy? Some insiders believe the Duchess understood exactly what she was doing. By bypassing Camilla and empowering Catherine, she may have reshaped the monarchy's internal future. But others whisper a darker theory that this was a quiet settling of old scores. Which interpretation carries more weight? To answer that, you have to understand the Duchess herself. She was never a passive figure drifting along ceremonial currents. Throughout her life, she cultivated a reputation for independence that bordered on defiance. While others adapted quickly to public moods, she remained anchored in principle, courteous but firm, traditional yet quietly formidable. When she spoke, people listened not because she demanded attention, but because she rarely wasted words. Those who knew her best insist that every major decision she made was deliberate, which makes the final amendment to her will feel less like sentiment and more like strategy. There is evidence that her convictions about succession and stewardship were not formed in her final years, but carried consistently over decades. She believed deeply in continuity, not just in bloodline, but in temperament. In private reflections, she often questioned whether modern pressures were reshaping the monarchy too quickly, too superficially. She admired discipline over charisma, restraint over reinvention, and in Catherine, she may have seen the embodiment of that philosophy. The estate, as a reward for loyalty during past crises, becomes a symbolic reinforcement of Catherine's anticipated future role, not officially declared, but unmistakably implied. Yet strategy does not erase the possibility of tension. Some close observers point to an ideological contrast between the Duchess and Camilla that simmered quietly over time, not open conflict, not scandal, but a divergence in how they perceived the monarchy's path forward. Camilla's resilience was forged through adaptation, through navigating public hostility and reshaping her image. The Duchess, by contrast, valued unyielding steadiness. If there was friction, it would not have been loud. It would have been philosophical, and philosophical disagreements within royal circles often manifest through symbolism rather than confrontation. The timing of the will's final revisions deepens the intrigue. Amendments were reportedly made after pivotal moments within the monarchy, moments that tested loyalty and recalibrated influence. That timing raises uncomfortable questions. Was the Duchess responding to shifting dynamics? Was she anticipating future power structures and positioning the estate accordingly? In royal politics, foresight is currency. By securing Catherine's association with such a historic symbol, the Duchess may have fortified her standing for years to come, long after headlines fade. The strategic impact cannot be ignored. Inheritance shapes narrative, and narrative shapes authority. Catherine's elevation through this legacy subtly enhances her influence, reinforcing public perception of her as the monarchy's stabilizing axis. Camilla's omission, meanwhile, introduces ambiguity, not about her title, but about her endorsement within certain traditionalist circles. The balance of symbolic power tilts ever so slightly, and in a monarchy where perception guides legitimacy, even slight shifts matter. How history will interpret this moment remains uncertain. Some will frame it as an act of loyalty, a final blessing bestowed upon the figure deemed most capable of safeguarding tradition. Others will cast it as a calculated maneuver, a final assertion of influence by a duchess unwilling to relinquish control without leaving her mark. And still others may see both truths: intertwined affection, layered with intention, sentiment sharpened by strategy. What is undeniable is this: the decision reverberates beyond sentiment. It redraws invisible lines of allegiance within the royal framework. It forces observers to reconsider who holds symbolic authority and why, and as the estate's new chapter begins under Catherine's guardianship, the implications continue to unfold in quiet, consequential ways. As the public absorbed the news, reactions revealed just how divided royal observers truly are. Across Britain and beyond, opinions erupted. Some hailed the Duchess as a guardian of tradition. Others saw cruelty in Camilla's exclusion. Social media ignited, commentators clashed, and royal watchers dissected every nuance. Was this a moment of clarity about the monarchy's future, or the spark of a deeper cultural divide? Within hours, headlines sharpened the narrative into something far more combustible than a simple inheritance story. Words like royal snub and palace power play dominated front pages. Analysts framed the Duchess's decision as either a courageous defense of legacy or a calculated marginalization of a reigning figure. The estate, once an anchor of private continuity, became a lightning rod for public emotion, and the monarchy, so practiced at managing its image, found itself once again at the mercy of interpretation. Supporters of Catherine responded with fierce enthusiasm. To them, this was validation proof that her quiet dedication had not gone unnoticed by those who understood the institution's inner fabric. Commentators praised her integrity, her discipline, her unwavering steadiness through turbulent years. They argued that the Duchess's decision affirmed a belief shared by many, that Catherine represents the monarchy's most reliable future. In their eyes, the inheritance was not divisive. It was decisive. Yet sympathy for Camilla surged just as powerfully. Many saw her exclusion as unnecessarily harsh, even symbolic of old wounds that refused to fully heal. They recalled her long journey toward acceptance, the endurance required to stand in public life after years of scrutiny. To these observers, the omission felt personal, a reminder that certain chapters of royal history still cast long shadows. The debate was no longer confined to property or protocol. It had become emotional, almost tribal. Younger audiences added another layer to the reaction. For them, the estate transfer represented generational symbolism. Some interpreted it as a signal that the monarchy is consciously aligning itself with a fresher, more contemporary face. Others questioned whether this moment revealed resistance to modernization, suggesting that traditionalist factions remain influential behind closed doors. The discussion expanded beyond personalities and into philosophy. What kind of monarchy is emerging? One rooted firmly in preservation, are depicting visibly to new expectations. International media amplified the spectacle. Across continents, networks analyzed the story as if it were a political maneuver rather than a familial decision. Comparisons were drawn to historical royal disputes. Commentators speculated about future ripple effects. The monarchy's internal symbolism became global theatre, and with every broadcast, scrutiny intensified. Unity, once presented as seamless, now appeared layered with complexity. Through it all, the palace maintained measured composure. Official statements reiterated respect for the Duchess's autonomy, but observers noted the renewed examination of royal cohesion. Analysts revisited past moments of tension, searching for patterns. Was this inheritance an isolated act, or part of a broader recalibration within the institution? The questions lingered, growing louder as opinions solidified. What began as a private testament evolved into a cultural flashpoint. It forced the public to confront not just who inherits land, but who inherits influence. It highlighted the fragile balance between tradition and transformation, between endorsement and omission. And as debate continued to ripple through Britain and beyond, one realization became unavoidable. This was no longer about a single estate. But beneath the noise lies the question that could define the monarchy's next chapter. An estate transfer should not alter the destiny of a monarchy. And yet, this one might, because in royal circles, symbolism is power. By choosing Catherine and excluding Camilla, the Duchess may have quietly signalled where legitimacy, trust and continuity truly reside. Has this inheritance reshaped the internal map of influence within the House of Windsor? The Gloucester estate now stands not merely as property, but as a long-term anchor of legacy. It represents a lineage of loyalty preserved through upheaval, a testament to those who guarded tradition when the institution trembled. By placing that anchor in Catherine's hands, the Duchess effectively tethered the future to a figure widely perceived as steady and composed. This was not about wealth, it was about weight. The weight of expectation, the weight of continuity, the weight of an unspoken endorsement that will follow Catherine long after public reaction cools. With this transfer, Catherine's symbolic authority expands beyond ceremonial titles. She now embodies not only the promise of succession, but the stewardship of a historic legacy chosen specifically for her. That distinction matters. Within the monarchy, perception often shapes reality. The estate reinforces her image as a stabilizing force, the quiet architect of endurance. Support around her appears to consolidate, not through loud declarations, but through subtle alignment. Influential voices who value continuity may now view her as the Duchess once did, the safeguard of the institution's enduring character. For Camilla, the recalibration is delicate. Her role remains intact, her title unchanged, yet the optics of exclusion introduce nuance. She must navigate this moment with the same resilience that defined her ascent. Publicly, she continues her duties with measured grace. Privately, the recalculation may be more complex, because in a system where symbolism guides perception, even absence carries narrative force. The monarchy thrives on balance, and that balance must now be carefully maintained to avoid the impression of internal hierarchy shifting too visibly. The implications for future succession optics are impossible to ignore. The estate, deeply tied to loyalty and crisis-era allegiance, now sits within Catherine's sphere. When future generations reflect on this period, they may interpret the Duchess's decision as an early consolidation of influence around a singular vision of continuity. Historians often search for turning points in hindsight. They may one day point to this moment, quiet yet potent, as a recalibration of symbolic power within the House of Windsor. Internaturally, the institution demonstrates resilience under pressure. It has endured far greater storms than a controversial inheritance. Yet resilience does not erase significance. Each event leaves an imprint. Each decision shapes narrative threads that weave into the monarchy's evolving identity. The Duchess's will has subtly redrawn those threads. It has reaffirmed tradition for some, unsettled assumptions for others, and compelled all to reconsider where trust and endorsement truly reside. Perhaps the most striking aspect of this episode is its quiet magnitude. No proclamations were made, no speeches delivered. Yet through a single deliberate act, the Duchess influenced how loyalty, legitimacy, and leadership are perceived within the royal framework. Catherine's ascent now carries deeper symbolic resonance. Camilla's presence, though steady, exists within a recalibrated landscape. The crown, as always, adapts, absorbing shock while preserving structure. History rarely announces its pivots in grand spectacle. Sometimes it whispers through parchment and inheritance. And as this chapter unfolds, one truth becomes increasingly clear. The monarchy's future will be shaped as much by subtle gestures as by public ceremony. And yet, one final truth lingers, perhaps the most powerful of all. In the end, a will is more than a legal document. It is a farewell, a confession, a statement of belief. The Duchess of Gloucester's final act was not loud, but it was unforgettable. Through one deliberate decision, she ensured her voice would echo long after her passing. Was this about love, loyalty, or the preservation of something she feared was slipping away? For a woman who dedicated her life to royal duty, the Duchess understood that legacy is not built in applause, but in quiet conviction. She had spent decades serving an institution that demands restraint, sacrifice, and unwavering allegiance to something larger than oneself. Titles change, public opinion shifts, but duty remains. In her final years, those close to her say she reflected often on continuity. Not continuity of power, but continuity of principle. She worried not about headlines, but about the monarchy's soul. What would endure when personalities faded? What would anchor the crown when turbulence returned? Her choice answers that question in the only language the monarchy truly understands: symbolism. By entrusting the estate to Catherine, she aligned herself with a figure she believed embodied stability. Catherine's calm, her discipline, her refusal to be pulled into spectacle, these qualities mirror the Duchess's own ideals. This was not favoritism dressed as sentiment. It was philosophy carved into inheritance. It was the Duchess declaring, without ever speaking publicly, that the future must be guided by steadiness rather than noise. And yet, woven into this decision is a poignant contrast. Popularity may capture public affection, but legacy shapes history. The Duchess chose legacy. She chose the quiet strength she believed would outlast controversy. In doing so, she elevated Catherine while leaving Camilla outside the boundaries of this particular trust. But exclusion does not erase resilience. Camilla's journey has always been defined by survival. She remains composed, continuing her role without visible fracture, proving that dignity can persist even in absence. The monarchy itself stands as proof of adaptability. It has weathered abdications, scandals, generational clashes, and cultural revolutions. It bends without breaking. The estate now joins that long narrative as a silent monument to choice, a reminder that even within rigid tradition, individuals still leave personal imprints. The Duchess's imprint is unmistakable. She did not shout her convictions, she signed them. As years pass, historians may debate her motives. Was it affection? Was it strategy? Was it a final assertion of belief? Perhaps it was all of these at once, because human decisions, especially those made at life's twilight, rarely fit neatly into a single explanation. What remains undeniable is the echo. Catherine now carries more than land. She carries expectation. Camilla carries grace under scrutiny. And the crown carries forward, absorbing this chapter into its ever-evolving identity. The estate will stand unchanged in structure, but forever altered in meaning. It represents loyalty rewarded, trust bestowed, and a future subtly shaped by a woman who understood the weight of her signature. Inheritance within the monarchy has never been neutral. It is deliberate, it is declarative, it is destiny framed in parchment. Because in the monarchy, inheritance is never just about land, it is about destiny, and destiny, once declared, cannot be undone. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.